One of the most important things, I think, that you know something about the background of the person who's running for a position, whether it's for judge or whatever it may be. We live in Ooltewah. My wife is here today, Angie, and we have two daughters, ages 13 and 10. Our youngest, the 10-year-old, graduates 5th grade Thursday night. They attend Grace Baptist Academy out in East Brainerd. They keep their dad in line, and they keep me busy all the time. And I'm not. Sometimes it's good having daughters. I can say that. So I did not grow up in Chattanooga. I grew up in South Pittsburgh, just a few miles away. But I can tell you, I spent seems like as much time in Chattanooga at times as I did in South Pittsburgh. Of course, this is back in the 70s and early 80s. Graduated high school in 1984, and South Pittsburgh didn't have a whole lot, and doesn't have a whole lot more today. The Kimball area is a lot more developed, but you had to come to Chattanooga to do much of anything. And I had some favorite spots, and I still do, in Chattanooga. But growing up, years in the 70s, had a few favorite spots on Dodds Avenue and South Broad Street and Broad Street downtown. And you start thinking about what's on Dodds Avenue. Well, a place called B's Restaurant's on Dodds Avenue, and it's still there today. That was one of my favorite spots. We went to eat a lot. South Broad Street was the Crystal Building, which now has a new home on South Broad Street. But the old location there on South Broad, that was one of my favorite spots to go by when we came to Chattanooga. And then downtown on Broad Street was the old Sears Building. And I don't know how many pairs of blue jeans and tennis shoes my parents bought from Sears growing up, but it was a bunch. But my favorite spot there, of course, was the candy store. That if you remember the old Sears Building downtown, you had the candy store right there in the middle of the store. So that's a place that my dad and I would always visit. So I'm one of 4 boys. I have 3 older brothers. It was sort of like being an only child in some ways, because my oldest brother is 18 years my senior, and my closest brother is 11 years my senior. 2 of those older brothers are also lawyers. My older brother, Rick Powers, is a lawyer in Knoxville with the firm of Arnett, Draper, and Haygood. He graduated from law school in 1975. My brother Steve is also an attorney at Baker Donaldson here in town. And my oldest brother is the one that had the real smarts in the family. He didn't become a lawyer. He followed in the footsteps of my dad. My dad was an iron worker and worked at the Arnold Engineering Development Center in Tullahoma for 32 years. My brother there is a Boilermaker welder and will be retiring in a couple of years. So that's a little bit of my family background. My parents are deceased. My mother was a stay-at-home mom who, even after having the 3 older boys move out, she loved to cook and was a great cook, and continued to cook just as much after my 3 older brothers left. So I was the only one around, to eat. So that's my vice, is good food. So having went through law school, when I got out of law school in 1991, very shortly after that, I met one of the jewels that Lookout Valley had, and that's Angie. Angie Smith is her maiden name. She grew up in Lookout Valley and graduated from Lookout Valley High School. And my father-in-law, some of you may know, Don Smith, who has owned and operated the Sun and Shade Garden Center over on Cummings Highway at Browns Ferry Road for over 30 years. And if you know Don or have ever gone in his store, he never meets a stranger. He knows everybody, and we'll talk your ear off if you're willing to listen. So, but that's a connection to the Lookout Valley, and used to, one of the other spots I remember in Lookout Valley when we'd come over here a lot, Chow Time, the old Chow Time there on Cummings Highway, which was also a favorite spot. We were married here in Chattanooga back in 1994 at Lookout Valley Baptist Church, which was Angie's family's church home. The Reverend Lamar Moore married us there in 1994. And we'll be celebrating our 18th anniversary 1 week from today. So to-do list, you got to remember that next Monday, 18 years. But Lamar is one of the people that really has been around in my life a lot. He is now he's retired from the full-time pastorate, but serves as an interim pastor at a church up in Bradley County. But Lamar is the executive director of an organization known as the Fellowship of Christian Peace Officers, and that is a national organization that has its headquarters right here in Chattanooga. And Lamar has done that now for a little over 3 years, being the executive director of that organization. And on our flyer, there's a quote on the back side of our flyer, and we'll give you one of those before you leave. But Lamar has a quote on there about me, and I'm happy to have his endorsement and his support as a candidate for Sessions Court judge. I've been a Republican all my life, and of course the Sessions Judge race is a nonpartisan race, so you're not going to see an R next to my name or a D next to anyone's name, but I've always been a Republican, grew up as a Republican. My mom and dad were Republicans. I remember the first time that I had the opportunity to vote, after having turned 18 a year or so earlier, was in the fall of 1984, and that's of course when Ronald Reagan was running for his re-election at that time. And so that was the first campaign that I was able to vote in of the national significance. And of course at that time we didn't have the early voting. It wasn't easy if you were not in, I was at UT Knoxville, and so had to go through the process to get the absentee ballot and all of that, and you had to really want to vote to do that. But that was my first opportunity to vote, and cast my vote at that time for Ronald Reagan, and I don't think I've missed any election since I became eligible to vote, and when I was in law school in Memphis, continued voting absentee and all of that. But the Republican Party has always meant a lot to me, and that's I hope we have a grand success here in November especially. Mentioned to you that I live in Ooltewah. We have been members of Ooltewah Baptist Church now. I forget how many years we've been members there, but our daughters, Ashlyn and Brenna, have both made their commitment and accepted Christ, have both been baptized there, so it's our church home, and we're very much involved in our church. I serve as a deacon there. I also teach. The most important thing and the most significant thing that I feel like I do there is I teach a couple Sunday school class, and I've done that. I've taught class there for a little over 3 years now. And the reason I feel that's so important, growing up, I grew up, my parents were always very much involved in church, and my mother taught a Sunday school class for about 25 years of children's Sunday school class, so I was in Sunday school every week and in church, and my dad helped with RAs and all of that. So I think it's really important when we have children especially that we have our children involved in church and Sunday school and an opportunity to get that kind of education. And so as we get older, sometimes as adults, sometimes we tend to get out of the habit, or if we haven't ever been in the habit even, of going to Sunday school and not as much involved. And that, I feel like, if you're not as involved as you were maybe perhaps growing up, some of us tend to think Sunday school is for kids, but it's not. It's for adults as well. So that's been a passion of mine and my wife's for a long time, being a part of an active Sunday school class and teaching. We've organized several marriage retreats over the years and had folks come in, and we'll go up to Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge and have those marriage retreats. But getting the parents there, and of course if you have them there, their children are there. So that's one of my passions. As Darren mentioned, I went to law school at the University of Memphis, undergrad at UT Knoxville. When I got out of law school, having two older brothers who had traveled that path, there were opportunities, of course, with some larger firms that I thought, well, I really want to get into court and have an opportunity not to just be researching and whatever for a long time before I see the inside of the courtroom, but I want to be out there out front from the very beginning. So I went to work for a small firm in Cleveland in Bradley County. I was the third attorney in that firm at the time, as a father and son, and that firm is Dietrich and Dietrich. It became Dietrich and Powers after I'd been there 2 years. I became a partner and was there for 5 years until the fall of '96. And in that small firm, I did everything. And of course, Cleveland's grown a lot since 1991 when I started practicing. But in a smaller town and a small firm, you do everything that comes through the door, and I did everything that came through the door, which involved criminal work, doing both appointed work, where the judges appoint the newest and youngest lawyers in town to handle those criminal cases for the indigents, as well as retained cases. And had an opportunity a couple of years, 2 or 3 years into my practice there in Cleveland, where there was an assistant DA who was going to be going on a medical leave for 6 or 9 months or so. and was offered the opportunity to serve as an interim assistant DA while also keeping my job there as a private practice at Dietrich & Powers. And so very much appreciated that opportunity and looked into that, but after talking with Lance Bracey, who's the Chief Disciplinary Counsel for the Tennessee Bar at that time, decided it was not going to be possible due to the kind of practice that I had in private practice, in which we did a lot of insurance defense work. And occasionally you've got folks pretty frequently in Sessions Court who are there for ticket, traffic citations, that kind of thing. And there was going to be a conflict if I were prosecuting those cases as an assistant DA and then handling a defense of a civil litigation case where someone's been involved in an accident and been sued by the injured party. So ultimately was not able to do that, but having been offered that opportunity by the district attorney's office to serve as an interim assistant DA to prosecute cases in Sessions Court, that obviously came about because of the work and what they saw with me in Sessions Court handling criminal cases there in Sessions Court. But did a variety of a broad practice, general litigation, domestic work, the criminal defense, insurance defense was sort of our bread and butter type work that we did. Contract cases, landlord, tenant, whatever it was in a small firm, we did that. At the end of 1996, I had the opportunity to leave Cleveland and come to Chattanooga to work for the firm of Witt, Gaither, and Whitaker. And that's a very old firm that doesn't exist now, but dated back to about the 1940s. Raymond Witt, who's deceased, and Phil Whitaker, who is still with us, and he lives on Lookout Mountain. But Witt, Gaither, and Whitaker was the firm where I joined at the end of 1996. And when I went there, my practice expanded into more civil litigation, handling more complex and higher dollar type things, but always 95% of the time on the defense side of handling those lawsuits for companies, businesses, manufacturers, retail, wholesalers. Do a lot of work in the transportation industry, motor carriers, trucking companies, that kind of thing. Construction litigation, commercial litigation, the whole gamut of civil litigation, and continued to handle criminal matters on a retained basis for folks that I knew who knew me or whatever, that had a matter that they wanted someone they know to represent them. So was there for 10 years. That firm ultimately had a merger with another firm. It was a long-time Chattanooga firm called Shoemaker Thompson. And that firm joined with Witt Gaither and created the firm of Shoemaker Witt Gaither for a few years. And then that firm ultimately dissolved in the fall of 2006. And at that time went to work for the firm of Baker Donaldson. And Baker Donaldson, you may know, is a regional law firm. Of course, the Baker there is our former esteemed senator from Tennessee for many years, Howard Baker. Baker Donaldson, we're currently in 7 states. We have 18 offices in those 7 states, including an office in Washington. Here in the Chattanooga office, we have about, 35 or so lawyers. I'm in the transportation, business litigation, and construction practice groups at Baker Donaldson, and have been there now 6 years. Continue handling the same type of cases that I handled at the former Witt Gaither Whitaker firm, mostly on the defense side of things, civil litigation. And Darren mentioned that since 2010, I've been recognized by Best Lawyers in America as a best lawyer in commercial litigation. And the Best Lawyers in America is one of the oldest, most prestigious, and highly respected ranking organizations in the United States, and that's based on peer rankings from other lawyers. And I am the only candidate of the 7 who's been recognized, and they have a number, I don't know how many areas of practice, but all areas of practice within the legal field are recognized by Best Lawyers, and I've been recognized in the commercial litigation field. But at Baker Donaldson, having a large firm, we're in the 7 states I mentioned, we have about 650 lawyers. The opportunities that I've had there have expanded as far as the kind of cases I've handled and where I've practiced. It's not just been handling litigation in Tennessee. I've been able to handle, as well as my former firm, opportunities to go try cases as what you call pro hoc vici for any lawyers in the audience, where you get admitted specially in another jurisdiction to handle a case. Handle cases at both the trial and appellate levels, the Court of Appeals, Tennessee Court of Appeals, and the Tennessee Supreme Court have handled